What's up, everybody? Today we're talking a little bit of cap rate. Cap rate and also the San Diego market. So first we'll go into what it is, how to calculate it, what are the advantages and the disadvantages, and then how do I personally use cap rate. So the capitalization rate, or the cap rate, is used in the world of commercial real estate, but of course in the 2 to 4 unit space as well. And it's to indicate the rate of return that you would generate on a real estate investment property. Now, the way that we factor that is we take the net operating income and we divide it by the purchase price, or by the asset value. So the question is, how do we find the net operating income? Well, we take the gross income, which usually is just the accumulation of all of the rents, but you may have income from other sources as well. So commonly, those other sources would be laundry facilities, or maybe you're renting out a portion of the parcel for storage, right? So you would take all of your rents, your gross income, and then you need to back out the operating expenses. Your operating expenses is essentially gonna contain everything other than the debt service. So other than essentially your mortgage payment. So that's gonna include things, but not limited to, your property taxes, insurance, repairs, utilities, maintenance, any management, association dues, supplies, etc. It's kind of everything, your operating expenses. And some investors even will take out the vacancy, which I would recommend, although in San Diego it's very low. And then also capital expenditures that you're accounting for over time, which are your larger expenditures like a roof replacement or even foundation, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, things like that. That's not necessarily recurring every month, but you're still accounting for it. So let's talk advantages. The big one is just because it's easy. It's universal. Everyone knows cap that's in the investing space, and it's really quick and easy to figure out. You just take the net operating income and you divide it by the purchase price. So there's no other really information that you need other than what the income is of the asset. I mean, you can kind of come up with your own expenses on your own. You can use like a universal percentage. If you don't have the exact expenses, usually you get that information once you're already in escrow. You don't necessarily get all of that up front. Sometimes in the commercial space, it's more common because everything is kind of by the numbers. But in the 2 to 4 unit space, what I would recommend up front is when you're getting ready to submit an offer, you're going to use just a percentage that you're comfortable with, just based off of experience. And there's a range. You know, it could be somewhere between 30 and 40%. I like to use 35, but you're going to take into account whether it's new construction, or maybe it's recently been fully remodeled, the asset, or you can see visibly and from the inside that there's a ton of deferred maintenance. So then you're going to estimate for higher operating expenses. So while the cap rate is the most popular way of analyzing a property, it's certainly not the best. It's not very thorough. It's really only taking into account the income. So your 4 portions of your real estate return, which is your cash flow, your appreciation, your principal pay down, and your tax savings, it's really just taking into account mainly just the cash flow. So it's technically just analyzing the yield over a 1-year rate of return, and it's also assuming that the property is purchased with cash, not with a loan. So it's an unleveraged rate of return. The other misconception is that cap rate is considered the rate of return by many people, but it's really not. It's really just a portion of your return. So I'll give an example with stocks. So in stocks, let's say that K equals your rate of return. Well, K equals the growth of the stock, but then also any potential dividends. So when we translate that to real estate, you have the growth portion is the appreciation, but the dividends, now that's your cap. Another thing to take into consideration is how your return is being taxed. Your cap rate, or your cash flow, is being taxed essentially as ordinary income, versus the appreciation, which is your capital gains, are being taxed far less. You have long-term capital gains is going to be somewhere between 15 to 20% depending on the gain. But then you also have other options like 1031 exchanges, where you can potentially defer and not pay any tax and kind of kick that can down the road. So that's definitely something else to consider versus just your cash flow that's coming in and the way that it's being taxed. Also, a higher cap rate doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better investment. Typically, the higher that the cap is, you kind of have to raise your eyes a little bit because a higher cap rate is offset. Cap rate takes into account the economy and the strength of the economy. So typically a really high cap rate is telling me that it could be either a bad economy, a bad market, a bad neighborhood, maybe there's a lot of crime or there's a lot of deferred maintenance. You have to have a higher cap rate to offset the price of the asset. It's relative to the rents that you get. So I always remind my clients, more important than the asset that you're buying is the economy that you're buying into. So now here are some ways that I like to use cap, because it is quick, it is easy, but again, it's not the end all be all. So what I like to do is when I'm analyzing a property, I take a look at the neighborhood, and the closer around the subject property, the better, obviously. And then I like to go back as short as I can. The more in recent history, the better. So typically I'll go back 90 days or less. Sometimes I have to go back more if there's limited data or the comparables aren't really similar. But when I'll go through and we'll look at the neighborhood and we'll see what the other units are trading for. And that's how we can analyze. And the solds are always going to be the best data. We'll take into account pendings and actives, but solds are always going to be best. And then we try to find like kind. So we look at the unit mix. If the property that I'm analyzing is all 2-bed, 1-baths, then the subject properties that are 2-bed, 1-baths are typically going to be better. And we want them to be the same amount of units. If I'm looking at a triplex, I want to look at other triplexes, and again, in a similar area. And you really have to know the geography, because if you're just going off of zip, that can vary a lot, because you can have two neighborhoods that are completely different from each other, but they're still technically in the same zip. So I'm also outlining on the map what I believe is a very similar neighborhood situation. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have any more questions about cap rate or how to calculate or analyzing deals in general, I'd be happy to help. Thank you so much, and I'll talk with you soon.